Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the world of Marie Antoinette, her forbidden love affairs, the secrets whispered in the corridors of the French court, and the scandalous behavior that defined an era. Picture yourself surrounded by opulence and intrigue in the grand palaces of Versailles. The lavish gowns, the delicate perfume in the air, and that constant hum of whispers, each conversation dripping with scandal. You probably won't survive this without feeling the heat of the gossip that swirled around this queen's love life. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your neck of the woods. I love hearing from you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Marie Antoinette, the 18th century Queen of France, has long been remembered for her excesses and extravagance. But what most people don't know is that beneath the gilded exterior lay a woman caught in the throes of forbidden love affairs that threatened to unravel everything: her reputation, her marriage, and ultimately her reign. The image of Marie as an innocent, misunderstood queen has long been the narrative. But what if I told you that there were secrets behind the curtains of the French court affairs that no one was supposed to know about? A queen trapped in a web of desire, politics, and survival. She was not simply the widow of France, as history would later dub her. She was a woman who faced an impossible balance between duty and passion. Historians still debate whether her relationship with Count Axel von Fersen was truly one of love, or whether it was merely a pawn in the greater political game of the time. Was it her only forbidden love, or was there much more to her relationships behind closed doors? We'll explore this tonight, along with some of the most shocking and secretive corners of her life. But before we jump into Marie's personal life, let's take a moment to understand the environment in which she lived. The court of Versailles was no ordinary court. It was a theater of power, intrigue, and constant maneuvering. With lavish balls, intricate political plots, and endless expectations placed on its members, the royal court was a pressure cooker for personal drama. You might be tempted to think that living in luxury meant having it all yet. For Marie Antoinette, the grandeur of Versailles wasn't the freedom it seemed. The constant scrutiny, the lack of genuine relationships, and the need for survival in an unforgiving environment made her vulnerable to the temptations of love and scandal. In this world of excess and secrecy, Marie was trapped. Trapped by her position, her marriage, and her desires. She sought solace in forbidden relationships, some of which we'll explore tonight, each revealing a different facet of her complex persona. As the rumors grew and her affairs became public knowledge, Marie's reputation shifted from being a frivolous queen who didn't care about her people to a woman caught in a struggle for personal connection amidst the political chaos. You see, Marie's love affairs were never just about passion. They were intertwined with power, survival, and the ever-present threat of revolution. Her actions, her choices, and even her deepest emotions had the potential to change the course of French history. So buckle up, because we're about to unravel the secrets that no one wanted to reveal about Marie Antoinette. The early years of Marie Antoinette were far from the extravagant life she would come to know as Queen of France. Born in Vienna on November 2nd, 1755, to the Holy Roman Emperor Francis I and Empress Maria Theresa, she was raised in the sophisticated courts of Austria. Marie's youth was filled with the wealth of European aristocracy, but it wasn't the palatial grandeur that would define her. It was her youthful innocence and free-spirited nature that set her apart, nature that would eventually lead her into the passionate and often dangerous world of courtly affairs. At the age of just 14, she was betrothed to Louis Auguste, the future Louis XVI of France. Their marriage was primarily a political alliance, meant to solidify Austria's influence over France, and Marie's emotions didn't factor into the deal. On the surface, she was a typical young royal trained to be poised, graceful, and dutiful. But beneath that delicate exterior was a woman longing for personal connection, someone whose desires couldn't be contained by the formalities of court life. Historians still argue whether Marie's early infidelity was purely a result of her unhappy marriage, or if it was a calculated effort to seek emotional escape from the isolation and duties of her royal position. She was just a teenager when she arrived in Versailles, overwhelmed by the stifling expectations of the French court. Her husband, Louis XVI, although a kind man, was distant and awkward. Their lack of intimacy and emotional connection left Marie vulnerable to the allure of other men who sought to fill the emotional void in her life. The early days of their marriage were marked by deep isolation for Marie. She was far from home, married to a man who wasn't emotionally available, and surrounded by an environment where she was expected to act as a symbol of French glory. The court at Versailles was beautiful, but suffocating, an endless parade of opulence, but with no room for personal joy. As she adjusted to her new life, Marie found herself drawn into the intrigues of the court, where personal connections often blurred with political ambitions. During her early years as queen, Marie's love life remained relatively quiet, but whispers began to swirl around her affection for certain members of the court. The most notable of these figures was Count Axel von Fersen, a Swedish nobleman whose deep friendship with the queen would eventually spark rumors that would plague her reign. But was it love? Or was it the pressures of courtly expectation and a need for connection that led Marie to Fersen's arms? As her public image began to form, her personal desires were anything but private. The most curious part of her early relationships is how she managed to balance the affection she had for certain men with the necessity of political decorum. Her love life, from its inception, was never just a matter of the heart. It was about survival. A woman in her position had to be incredibly strategic, and that meant keeping her emotions carefully hidden beneath layers of courtly pretense. In the midst of it all, Marie was still a young woman, eager to experience love in a way that transcended the rigid structures of the French monarchy. The affection she sought wasn't just for comfort or companionship. It was a desperate need for genuine connection, something that was becoming more and more elusive within the walls of Versailles. But could she afford to pursue these fleeting desires without risking the wrath of the court and the French public? The affair with Count Axel von Fersen is perhaps the most well-known and controversial chapter in Marie Antoinette's love life. The Swedish nobleman was introduced to Marie during her early years in France, and what began as a simple friendship soon blossomed into something far more complicated and secretive. Their bond was one of intense affection, a connection that historians still debate to this day. Was it truly a romantic affair, or were they merely close companions caught up in the seductive world of royal politics? Fersen was a figure of power and charm, a man who knew how to navigate the intricacies of European courts. He was well-connected, intelligent, and had the poise that would have made him an attractive companion to any woman in the court. But Marie? She wasn't just any woman. She was the Queen of France, married to a king whose emotional reticence left her searching for something more than what her marriage offered. Enter Fersen, the Swedish nobleman who seemed to embody everything Marie was missing: a deep emotional connection, a shared sense of duty, and perhaps even an undeniable spark of romance. Their relationship remained mostly hidden from the public eye, but the French court, ever vigilant, was quick to pick up on the growing closeness between Marie and Fersen. They shared numerous private moments, exchanged intimate letters, and were often seen together in social settings, sparking rumors of an affair that would not remain secret for long. In fact, The court's obsession with their relationship soon took on a life of its own, with courtiers and servants eagerly speculating on the true nature of the queen's feelings for Fersen. Historians still argue whether their relationship was purely a matter of the heart, or whether Fersen's presence in Marie's life was also influenced by the political games that permeated the French court. Some believe that Fersen, with his noble background and strategic position within the European aristocracy, may have seen the queen as a way to solidify his own political standing. Others argue that Fersen's feelings for Marie were genuine, and that he was one of the few men who truly understood the emotional isolation she faced as queen. Their relationship, however, was not without its challenges. The political climate in France was volatile, and the queen's affection for Fersen became an open secret that could easily be manipulated by her enemies. Marie was already facing public disdain for her extravagant lifestyle, and her personal relationships were often viewed through the lens of her political actions. Was her affection for Fersen a means of rebellion against the constraints of the court? Or was it simply a desire for emotional connection in a world that seemed devoid of love? In many ways, Fersen's position in Marie's life was that of a safe harbor. He was a man who could provide her with the emotional stability and understanding that Louis XVI, for all his virtues, couldn't offer. Yet, their love was not without its own sense of tragedy. Both Marie and Fersen were keenly aware that their relationship could never be fully realized in the way they desired. The political ramifications of their closeness were too great, and the pressures of their respective roles too heavy. Despite the growing speculation and the mounting tension around their relationship, Fersen remained a steady figure in Marie's life. His letters to her, though carefully crafted, reveal a deep affection and concern for her well-being, and these correspondences would later become a critical part of the narrative surrounding their affair. While Marie's public life was being scrutinized by all of France, her private relationship with Fersen remained a sanctuary where she could, for a moment, feel like a woman rather than just a queen. But of course, nothing in the world of royalty remains private for long. As their relationship continued to develop, so did the rumors. The French court, ever the epicenter of intrigue, buzzed with speculation about the nature of Marie's feelings for Fersen. Was it love? Was it a political alliance? Or was it something in between, an affair born of necessity as much as desire? Despite the romantic nature of their connection, it became clear that their love affair would never be fully realized. The political stakes were simply too high. The very existence of their relationship posed a threat to the monarchy, and the whispers of Marie's infidelity only added fuel to the revolutionary fires that were beginning to burn across France. And yet, despite the public scandal, Marie and Fersen continued their correspondence in private, their bond remaining one of the most talked about, yet mysterious elements of her reign. It was a love that never quite came to fruition, but its implications would resonate for years to come, adding to the narrative of a queen caught between her duties, her desires, and the turbulent political landscape of 18th century France. As the months passed, Marie Antoinette's personal life became an open book for the French court. The affair with Count Axel von Fersen, though largely confined to whispered rumors, had already begun to shape the narrative of her reign. What was once a private matter became a political weapon, wielded against her by her enemies in the court and the growing populace. But Marie, ever the queen, had to maintain a careful balance, preserving her public image while grappling with the intensity of the emotions she was experiencing behind closed doors. The relationship between Marie and Fersen was not simply a matter of romance. It became a symbol of the queen's isolation, a public display of her vulnerability. The court was already rife with gossip, but now whispers about the queen's affection for a foreign nobleman threatened to undermine the monarchy itself. In a world where every movement was scrutinized, every glance analyzed, Marie could not afford to appear weak or indulgent. Her infidelity, whether true or not, became a focus for political factions vying for power. Historians still argue whether the Queen's relationship with Fersen was entirely driven by love, or if it was fueled by her need to forge a personal connection in an environment that felt increasingly cold and oppressive. Fersen, though charming and undoubtedly fond of the Queen, was also a man with his own political interests. His connections in Sweden and his high status made him an important figure in European diplomacy. Could he have been seeking to influence France's foreign policy by getting closer to the Queen? Or was it simply the attraction between two souls caught in the same world of royal obligation? Regardless of the exact nature of their relationship, one thing was clear: it was a dangerous liaison. As the revolution loomed, the French people were growing restless. Rumors of Marie's affairs fed into the public's growing contempt for the monarchy. The Queen was already the target of scorn for her extravagant lifestyle, her extravagant spending, and her perceived indifference to the suffering of the common people. But now, her personal life was under attack as well. The notion of a queen who indulged in forbidden love affairs only added to the perception that she was out of touch with the people she was meant to serve. One of the most telling aspects of Marie's relationship with Fersen was how it played into the larger political landscape. As the Queen's personal life became fodder for public scandal, the monarchy's political struggles grew more intense. The French Revolution was just beginning to stir, and Marie's private affairs, along with the lavish lifestyle she maintained, were seen by many as a symbol of everything that was wrong with the French aristocracy. The French court, with its pomp, its intrigue, and its obsession with scandal, was no longer a safe haven for Marie. It had become a battlefield where every whisper, every glance could be a weapon in the war for public opinion. Marie's refusal to be fully transparent about her relationship with Fersen only fueled the fire. She never openly acknowledged the affair, but she also never denied it, allowing the rumors to fester and grow. In her mind, maintaining some level of mystery was crucial to preserving her dignity as a queen. She could not afford to admit to a scandal that could lead to her downfall, but she also could not distance herself entirely from a relationship that had provided her with the emotional connection she had longed for. As the revolution gained momentum, the whispers surrounding Marie's affair with Fersen became more than just gossip. They became part of the larger narrative of a queen who was out of touch with the reality of her subjects. The French people were angry, not only at the monarchy's lavish spending, but also at the perceived corruption and immorality of their rulers. Marie's forbiddance love was now a symbol of the very excesses that had led France to the brink of revolution. But Marie's relationship with Fersen wasn't the only scandal that surrounded her reign. Throughout her time at Versailles, the Queen found herself entangled in numerous other relationships, both romantic and political, that would only add to the perception of her as a queen of excess and indulgence. As we continue our exploration of Marie's love affairs, it becomes clear that her relationships were not only a source of personal solace, but also a reflection of the increasingly volatile world in which she lived. The court of Versailles was, in many ways, a stage and intricate performance where power, intrigue, and personal lives were often more important than the official duties of the monarchy. Marie Antoinette's love affairs were not just a personal matter, but an integral part of the political and social games played within those gilded walls. The French court was a place where alliances were forged not just through royal marriages, but through whispered conversations, fleeting glances, and the quiet but deliberate exchange of secrets. Marie's entanglements with various men were just as much about navigating this delicate web of power as they were about seeking personal affection. Her relationship with Count Axel von Fersen may have been the most significant, but it was far from the only one. Marie's ladies-in-waiting, who were often her closest confidants, also played a crucial role in her private life and love affairs. These women, who served as both companions and political allies, could either protect or expose the queen, depending on their loyalties. They were, in many ways, the gatekeepers of Marie's secrets, helping her navigate the treacherous waters of Versailles, while also adding their own layers of intrigue to the queen's personal dramas. Historians still debate the extent of the involvement of these women in Marie's affairs. Were they mere observers, or were they active participants in the politics of the court, using their proximity to the queen to further their own ambitions? Some have suggested that Marie's ladies-in-waiting may have been more than just passive bystanders in the love stories that played out behind closed doors. Their actions and the way they maneuvered within the court would have shaped the trajectory of Marie's relationships, especially as tensions between the monarchy and the French people began to escalate. One particular figure, the Duchesse de Palednik, became one of Marie's closest and most influential confidants. The Duchesse was a woman who knew how to navigate the complex world of Versailles, and her connection with Marie was not just one of friendship, but also of political importance. The Duchesse had the Queen's ear and was often seen as a protector of Marie's interests. However, her own involvement in scandalous affairs would also tie her name to the Queen's in the eyes of the court, adding fuel to the flames of public outrage. The role of these women in Marie's personal life cannot be overstated. They provided her with the emotional support she needed to cope with the pressures of her position, but they also participated in the intrigues and gossip that surrounded her. They were the ones who would have been privy to the most intimate details of her love life, and it is through them that much of the information about Marie's relationships with Fersen and others found its way into the public eye. As the Queen's personal life became increasingly entangled with the political crisis of the time, her love affairs began to take on a different significance. They were no longer just matters of the heart. They were part of the larger drama of a nation on the brink of revolution. The court's obsession with Marie's relationships revealed a deeper anxiety about the monarchy's ability to maintain control over the French people. The scandals surrounding the Queen's love life were seen by many as symbolic of the excesses and moral decay that had come to define the French aristocracy. But Marie, ever the Queen, maintained her position, even as the walls of Versailles began to close in around her. Her relationship with Fersen, while deeply emotional, was just one piece of the puzzle. The Queen's personal life had become inextricably linked to the fate of the monarchy, and the scandals that erupted around her were used as tools by those who sought to undermine her and her husband's rule. Despite the growing pressure, Marie continued to navigate her relationships with a sense of calculation. She understood that each affair, each moment of emotional indulgence, came with its own political risks. Yet she also knew that her position at the court required her to maintain an air of control, never fully admitting to the affairs, but never entirely denying them either. This delicate dance between truth and fiction, loyalty and betrayal, was something she mastered over time. The love affairs of Marie Antoinette, while deeply personal, were never just private matters. They were woven into the very fabric of the political struggles that consumed France. As we continue to explore the Queen's relationships, we'll see how they played a role not just in her personal life, but in the broader drama of a nation on the edge of collapse. As Marie Antoinette's private life began to leak into the public domain, the role of her ladies-in-waiting became increasingly crucial. These women, whose job it was to attend to the Queen's personal needs, were more than just servants. They were influential figures within the court, often wielding power in subtle but profound ways. These ladies were with Marie through her moments of joy, her heartbreak, and her deepest fears, and they often became part of the narrative that fueled the gossip and intrigue surrounding her. Among these women, one of the most influential was the Duchesse de Polignac. A close confidant of the Queen, the Duchesse's presence at court was a constant reminder of the shifting dynamics of Marie's relationships. As the Queen's closest ally, the Duchesse's loyalty to Marie was unquestioned, but her own personal life, filled with scandals of its own, would add to the growing rumors surrounding the Queen. The Duchesse had a reputation for being deeply involved in courtly intrigues and for navigating the complex power structures of Versailles. Her influence over the Queen was undeniable, but her entanglements in the court's political dramas would eventually tie her fate to Marie's. The question of whether these women were merely observers or active participants in the Queen's love life is still a matter of scholarly debate. Some historians argue that these ladies were simply innocent bystanders, caught up in the whirlwind of Versailles political and social intrigues. Others suggest that they were active agents in promoting Marie's relationships, helping to foster a sense of camaraderie among the Queen's inner circle and ensuring that she was supported in her most intimate moments. However, what cannot be denied is the fact that these women played a pivotal role in shaping the public perception of Marie's relationships and in helping to maintain the delicate balance between royal duty and personal desire. Marie's relationships, particularly with Fersen, were not just a matter of romantic passion. They were also deeply tied to the political landscape of France. The court of Versailles was a place where power was constantly being negotiated, and the Queen's love life was no exception. Her affections were carefully scrutinized by those in power, both in France and beyond, and her relationships were often used as tools in the larger game of diplomacy. Fersen's role in this dynamic cannot be overstated. As a foreign nobleman, his presence in Marie's life raised questions about the Queen's loyalty to France and to her king. His connections in Sweden, a nation that had historically been in competition with France, added a layer of complexity to their relationship. Historians continued to debate the extent to which Fersen's political ambitions influenced his relationship with Marie. Was he simply a man in love with the Queen, or was he also seeking to strengthen his position within the European power structures? Some scholars suggest that Fersen, though undoubtedly fond of Marie, saw her as a means to further his own goals. His role in French politics, particularly during the years leading up to the Revolution, has been the subject of much speculation. Could his involvement with Marie have been a strategic move designed to secure his position in the shifting political landscape of Europe? Or was it simply a case of a love affair that became intertwined with the grander struggles of European diplomacy? As Marie's relationship with Fersen continued, so did the public's fascination with the Queen's private life. The French people, already dissatisfied with the monarchy, found in Marie's affairs a symbol of the excesses and corruption of the royal court. The Queen's love life was used against her by her enemies, both within the court and in the growing revolutionary factions outside it. Her apparent disregard for the suffering of the common people, combined with her indulgent personal life, made her an easy target for criticism. The very intimacy of her relationships, once seen as private and personal, became part of the political narrative that fueled the flames of revolution. Marie's relationship with her ladies-in-waiting and the people closest to her was complex, often blurred by the constant pressure of living in a fishbowl of public scrutiny. Her love affairs were no longer just a matter of personal desire. They were a political liability. Every romantic gesture, every private letter, and every whispered conversation became a part of the narrative that was being crafted about her. She was no longer just a queen. She was a symbol, a political pawn, and a target for those who sought to bring down the monarchy. The affair with Fersen, like all of Marie's relationships, was not just about love, it was about survival. Her affection for him, and the secrecy that surrounded it, was a reflection of the Queen's struggle to retain some semblance of personal freedom in a world that was increasingly hostile to her. As the revolution gathered steam, the whispers of Marie's forbidden love affairs became louder, and the consequences of her relationships became clearer. The stage was set for the tragic fall of the Queen, and her relationships, both public and private, would play a crucial role in the narrative that would define her legacy. By the time Marie Antoinette's personal life had become an open scandal, the French monarchy was already teetering on the edge of collapse. The Queen's affection for Count Axel von Fersen, as well as her other rumored affairs, had become part of a larger narrative, one that portrayed her as out of touch with the suffering of her people and the political unrest that was sweeping across France. However, her love life wasn't simply a matter of passion and personal desire. It was also deeply entwined with the shifting political allegiances that surrounded the monarchy. As the revolution gained momentum, the power struggles between the French monarchy and the people reached a boiling point. The monarchy was increasingly seen as a symbol of corruption, excess, and an old regime that had failed to adapt to the changing times. The Queen, in particular, was vilified for her lavish lifestyle and the rumors of her relationships, which made her seem like a disconnected, frivolous figure at the height of France's financial crisis. Yet, behind the extravagant gowns and the glittering jewels, there was a queen who was desperate for genuine human connection, someone who had been cast into a role of public duty, with little room for personal freedom. Marie's relationship with Fersen, and the public fascination with it, reflected the growing divide between the monarchy and the people. While the Queen's emotional needs were being scrutinized, the royal court continued its indulgence in lavish banquets, expensive fashions, and extravagant entertainment. The growing discontent among the common people was not just about these luxuries, but about the perceived disregard for their plight. The Queen's personal life, especially her relationships with powerful men, became symbols of the monarchy's disconnect from the suffering of the French populace. Fersen's place in this drama was complicated by his own status as a foreign nobleman. His connections with Marie not only added to the public scandal, but also raised questions about the Queen's loyalty to France. Some believed that Fersen's involvement with Marie was purely romantic, a love affair between two individuals caught in the swirl of courtly intrigue. Others, however, suspected that Fersen had his own political motives. His family's ties to Sweden and his influence within European courts could have made him a valuable ally to the Queen, though the true extent of his political influence is still debated. The whispers of Fersen's role in the court also intersected with a larger European political landscape. France's relations with Sweden were not the only issue that complicated their connection. With the rising tensions in France and the increasingly volatile nature of European diplomacy, Marie's relationships were no longer just private affairs. They were also tangled in the greater web of alliances and rivalries that defined the political realities of the time. Fersen's position at court wasn't just about romance. It was about navigating the treacherous waters of European politics. Historians still argue whether Fersen was a true lover or merely a pawn in a larger political game. Did he genuinely care for Marie? Or was he using the relationship to further his own political ambitions? And did Marie, in turn, use her affection for Fersen as a way to solidify her own position in a world where personal connections often mattered more than formal titles? Despite the speculation and the growing public outcry over her personal life, Marie Antoinette was determined to maintain control over her image. She never openly acknowledged her affair with Fersen, and she carefully crafted her public persona to reflect the dignity and grace that was expected of her as queen. Yet, even as she worked to maintain her reputation, the scandals surrounding her love life continued to unfold, exacerbating the tensions that were already threatening to tear apart the French monarchy. The affair with Fersen was, in many ways, symbolic of the larger struggles facing Marie as queen. Her personal desires and the political realities of her reign were in constant conflict. As the revolution gained speed, it became clear that Marie's ability to navigate this divide would be crucial to her survival. But the political and personal costs of her relationships would soon become too great. Her love for Fersen, once a source of emotional refuge, would eventually become another burden in her tragic fall from grace. As the revolution continued to build, so did the public scrutiny of Marie's actions. Her personal life, once a secret kept behind the closed doors of Versailles, became a point of focus for revolutionaries seeking to expose the monarchy's excesses. Marie's romantic liaisons, particularly with Fersen, were used to fuel the narrative that she was not just a queen, but a symbol of the moral decay and corruption that had brought France to the brink of revolution. In the end, Marie's affair with Fersen and the political consequences that followed played a role in her tragic demise. The relationship, like all of Marie's liaisons, became part of the larger story of the monarchy's fall. The queen's desperate search for love and connection was not enough to save her from the political storm that was gathering around her. The whispers of forbidden love that once seemed like an innocent escape would soon be overshadowed by the thunderous cries for justice that would echo throughout France. As Marie Antoinette's forbidden love affairs continued to unfold in the shadows of Versailles, the whispers of her personal life began to clash with the growing public unrest. The revolution was not just a political uprising. It was a movement fueled by resentment, jealousy, and a deep desire to dismantle the structures that had supported the monarchy for centuries. The queen, with her extravagant lifestyle and her passionate liaisons, became a focal point for the rage and frustration that had been bubbling beneath the surface of French society. Her love life was no longer just a private matter. It was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the monarchy. By the time the revolution reached its most dangerous phase, Marie was no longer the beloved queen she once had been. Her lavish wardrobe, her lavish parties, and her apparent indifference to the suffering of the people made her a prime target for the revolutionaries. They saw her not just as a queen, but as a figurehead of everything that was wrong with France, a woman who had indulged in forbidden love affairs while her people starved and suffered. Her relationship with Fersen, while deeply emotional, became a symbol of the monarchy's disconnect from reality. His foreign status, combined with the secrecy surrounding their connection, allowed the queen's critics to spin a narrative of betrayal. They painted Fersen as a manipulative outsider who had entangled the queen in a web of deceit. Whether or not their love was purely personal, it was seen as a reflection of Marie's failure to connect with the needs of the people and her vulnerability to outside influences. But the affair was not just about Fersen. Marie's personal relationships with various members of the French aristocracy added fuel to the fire. The queen's increasing isolation from the common people, coupled with her close ties to noblemen who were seen as self-serving, led to a growing public perception of Marie as a queen who was far removed from the everyday realities of life in France. Each affair, each moment of emotional indulgence, only added to the narrative of her being a queen who cared more about love and luxury than the fate of her nation. The public scrutiny of Marie's love life was intensified by the growing sense of nationalism and revolutionary fervor that swept through France. As the revolutionaries worked to dismantle the old regime, they seized upon the queen's personal scandals as proof of the monarchy's moral decay. The affair with Fersen, in particular, became a tool used by the revolutionaries to weaken the monarchy's credibility. Whether or not the relationship was truly a love affair or merely a political alliance, it became an emblem of the excesses and failings of the aristocracy. Marie's refusal to publicly address her love life only made matters worse. Her silence, combined with her apparent inability to see the severity of the political situation, led many to believe that she was either ignorant of the brewing revolution or actively complicit in the political games of the court. Historians still debate whether Marie was truly unaware of the revolutionary sentiments growing among the French people, or if she simply chose to ignore them in favor of maintaining her own desires and privileges. Her refusal to publicly confront her relationships, combined with her apparent lack of concern for the suffering of the people, made her a target for those seeking to bring about her downfall. The Queen's silence also highlighted the divide between her and the King. Louis XVI, though kind-hearted and well-intentioned, was also increasingly viewed as weak and indecisive. His inability to protect his wife from the mounting political pressure, combined with his own growing unpopularity, left Marie isolated and vulnerable. While Louis tried to maintain some level of control over the monarchy, it was clear that the monarchy itself was unraveling. The public's perception of Marie, once the innocent and misunderstood queen, had shifted dramatically. She was now seen as a symbol of everything that was wrong with the monarchy, a woman whose personal desires had contributed to the downfall of an entire nation. As the revolution reached its climax, Marie's personal life, once a private affair, became inextricably linked to the larger political narrative. The affair with Fersen, along with the rumors of other liaisons, became a rallying cry for those who sought to destroy the monarchy and bring about a new order in France. In many ways, Marie's love life was a microcosm of the larger struggles facing France. It was a symbol of the excesses, the corruption, and the eventual collapse of the old regime. Marie's final moments, as the revolutionaries closed in on her, would be marked by the same secrecy and silence that had characterized much of her life. She would never have the chance to fully confront her past or the scandal that had surrounded her. Instead, she would face her fate alone, as a woman whose forbidden love affairs had become a symbol of the monarchy's downfall. The revolution, with all its fury and bloodshed, would forever change the course of French history, and Marie Antoinette, the queen whose personal life had been laid bare for all to see, would become one of its tragic victims. As the revolution gathered pace and the monarchy continued to crumble, Marie Antoinette's personal and political worlds became increasingly intertwined, eventually leading to her tragic downfall. Her forbidden love affairs, particularly with Count Axel von Fersen, had already marked her as a target for the revolutionaries. But it was the growing unrest in France that truly sealed her fate. The Queen, once a beloved figure at court, was now seen by the people as the embodiment of everything that was wrong with the monarchy, a symbol of excess, decadence, and moral decay. Marie's struggle to maintain her dignity in the face of these mounting scandals was not just about preserving her reputation. It was about survival. The Queen's every move was being watched by both her enemies and her allies, and each new rumor only intensified the pressure on her. As the revolution took root and the political landscape shifted, Marie found herself at the center of a power struggle that extended far beyond her personal life. The Queen's forbidden love affairs were just one piece of the puzzle, but they were the part of the story that the revolutionaries used to fuel their narrative of moral corruption and royal tyranny. Despite the political and personal turmoil she faced, Marie continued to hold on to her dignity for as long as she could. The affair with Fersen, although never publicly acknowledged, was something she could not escape. Fersen had been a source of comfort to her, a man who had provided her with the emotional connection and understanding that she so desperately craved. But as the revolution progressed, their relationship became a liability A reminder of the Queen's inability to separate her personal desires from the greater political struggles at hand. Her political position had already been weakened by the Queen's extravagant lifestyle, her lavish spending, and her involvement in political scandals. Now, with the revolution picking up speed, Marie was becoming more isolated. The Queen's affair with Fersen, with its secrecy and its foreign nature, became a symbol of the monarchy's moral failings. The revolutionaries, intent on toppling the monarchy, saw her as the embodiment of everything they sought to destroy. The rumors about her love life only served to solidify their perception of Marie as a queen, whose desires were detached from the reality of her country's suffering. But even as Marie's position grew more precarious, she clung to the hope that she could somehow protect her family and the monarchy. Her husband, King Louis XVI, was a figurehead who struggled with the growing political crisis, and the burden of leadership fell largely on her shoulders. Yet, despite her determination, the political tides were against her, and the Queen's personal life became one of the most potent symbols of the monarchy's collapse. The more she tried to distance herself from the rumors, the more they grew, feeding the fire of revolution that threatened to consume everything in its path. Historians still argue whether Marie's affair with Fersen was more than just a personal connection, or whether it played a significant role in the political consequences that followed. Was it simply a woman's desire for love and companionship in a world that had stripped her of both? Or was it a deliberate attempt to exert influence in a court where loyalty and favor were key to survival? What is clear, however, is that the affair had profound consequences on her reputation. While Fersen may have been a source of emotional solace for the Queen, his relationship with her became a source of tension, a reminder of the monarchy's inability to adapt to the changing political climate. As the revolution reached its height, Marie Antoinette's fate seemed sealed. The king was arrested, the royal family was imprisoned, and the Queen was left to face her enemies alone. The Queen's love life, once a source of scandal, was now part of the larger narrative that led to her ultimate demise. Her forbidden love affairs, her struggle for personal connection, and her political missteps all contributed to the tragic arc of her life. But Marie's story didn't end with her fall from grace. Her legacy, despite the revolutionaries' efforts to tarnish her image, would live on as a tragic tale of a woman caught between duty and desire. The whispers about her love life, the political ramifications of her relationships, and the ultimate end of her reign are all part of a much larger story. A story of a queen who lived in a time of revolution and change, but whose personal world remained bound by the same struggles that defined the monarchy itself. Marie Antoinette's life, her desires, her relationships, and her public scandals was a microcosm of the larger political drama that played out in France during the late 18th century. The revolution, with its fury and its demands for justice, would forever change the course of history. But even in her final moments, as she faced the guillotine, the Queen remained a symbol of a world that had already vanished, a world where forbidden love could still ignite the passions and the tragedies of those who lived it. Marie Antoinette's final days were marked by the same secrecy and political intrigue that had plagued much of her life. The affair with Count Axel von Fersen, along with other scandals that had followed her through her reign, had helped to cast her as a villain in the eyes of the revolutionaries. But in the final chapter of her story, the Queen was stripped of her regal dignity, reduced to a prisoner, and ultimately a symbol of the monarchy's complete collapse. Once the revolution had reached a fever pitch, Marie and Louis XVI were arrested, and the royal family was thrust into the cold, grim world of revolutionary justice. The once beautiful palaces of Versailles and Tuileries, places where Marie had enjoyed her extravagant lifestyle and sought refuge in her secret liaisons, were now far behind her. She was placed under house arrest, her every move scrutinized by the revolutionary authorities who had declared war on the monarchy. It was a tragic irony Marie Antoinette, once the epitome of elegance and power, now languished in a cold, dreary cell. Her final interactions with her lover Fersen were marked by the same tension that had surrounded their entire relationship. Their affair, while never fully acknowledged by either of them, had been a source of comfort and refuge for Marie during the darkest moments of her reign. But in her final days, as the guillotine loomed over her, the romance that had once been so vibrant became a distant memory. Fersen, who had been with her through the best and worst times, was now in Sweden, unable to help his beloved queen in her time of need. Historians continue to debate whether Fersen's role in Marie's life was one of genuine love, or whether it was part of a larger political strategy. Some suggest that he was simply a confidant and friend, offering Marie the emotional support she needed during a time of great personal crisis. Others speculate that his involvement in her life was driven by a desire to influence French politics, particularly as tensions with Sweden escalated. What is undeniable, however, is that the affair, while deeply emotional for Marie, was also a reflection of the tumultuous political and personal circumstances in which she found herself. Marie's final trial and execution were a harsh and public end to her reign. As the Queen of France stood before the Revolutionary Tribunal, she was accused of a litany of charges, including the corruption of the French people and the betrayal of her country. The affair with Fersen was never officially cited as a reason for her downfall, but it became a symbolic part of the larger narrative used to justify the monarchy's destruction. Her inability to separate her personal desires from the fierce political demands of the monarchy was presented as proof of her irresponsibility and failure as queen. In the final hours before her execution, Marie Antoinette's thoughts likely turned to the relationships and love affairs that had shaped much of her life. Her marriage to Louis XVI, though based on political necessity, had also been a source of deep emotional isolation. Her personal connections, especially her bond with Fersen, provided her with solace during times of loneliness and despair. But ultimately, those relationships were no match for the revolutionary forces that sought to dismantle the monarchy and the old order. On the day of her execution, Marie's once pristine image as a queen of grace and beauty was shattered by the reality of her situation. She faced her fate with dignity, though history would forever remember her as a figure of scandal, excess, and moral decay. Her final moments, as she stood before the guillotine, were a tragic reminder of how her forbidden love affairs, once hidden away in the private chambers of Versailles, had become part of the larger political story that would define the French Revolution. The Queen's death, though brutal and final, did not mark the end of her legacy. Marie Antoinette's life would continue to be a topic of fascination and controversy long after her execution. Her love affairs, her political missteps, and the public scrutiny of her private life would become key elements of the narrative that surrounded her story. In death, she became a martyr for the monarchy, a symbol of a lost world that would never return. Even after her death, the story of Marie Antoinette's forbidden love affairs would continue to shape how history viewed her. Her affair with Fersen, the most enduring and passionate of her liaisons, would be remembered not just as a personal love story, but as a part of the larger drama that led to the fall of the French monarchy. As the revolution turned its gaze on the royal family, it was clear that the personal tragedies of Marie's life were forever intertwined with the political upheavals of her time. The Queen's love life, which had once been whispered about in the halls of Versailles, was now woven into the very fabric of French history. Her struggles with love, loyalty, and duty would forever be remembered as part of the tragic tale of Marie Antoinette. an iconic figure whose life was shaped as much by her forbidden affairs as by the revolution that ultimately destroyed her. Marie Antoinette's death, a tragic and brutal event in the history of the French Revolution, marked the ultimate destruction of a queen who had once been adored and revered. Yet, her final moments were more than just the death of a monarch. They were the end of an era, a period of royal excess, political intrigue, and forbidden passions that had defined the French court for decades. The fall of Marie Antoinette was not just about the collapse of a monarchy. It was a turning point in history, a moment when the ideals of revolution replaced the traditions of the old order. And though the revolution ultimately claimed the life of the queen, her legacy lived on in the hearts and minds of the people, and in the myth that would surround her for centuries. The events that led to Marie Antoinette's execution were as much about the symbolism of the monarchy's collapse as they were about any specific misdeed she may have committed. Her love affairs, particularly with Count Axel von Fersen, had long been the subject of public gossip and political maneuvering. The Queen's personal life had been laid bare for all to see, and those intimate details became part of the ammunition used by the revolutionaries to condemn her. Yet, at the heart of the revolution was the idea of justice, a concept that the people of France believed had been denied them by the monarchy. And so, they sought to strip away not just the Queen's title, but her very humanity. Marie Antoinette's relationship with Fersen, though never officially acknowledged, had been the source of much speculation throughout her life. Some believed it to be a true love story, a passionate affair between two people who found solace in each other during a time of political turmoil. Others, however, saw it as a symbol of the Queen's moral decay and disregard for her duty to France. Regardless of the nature of their relationship, it had become inextricably linked to the monarchy's ultimate collapse. And when Marie Antoinette was sentenced to death, her affair with Fersen was just one of the many aspects of her life that revolutionaries would use to justify her execution. But even in the face of death, Marie Antoinette remained a queen dignified and composed, refusing to let the revolutionaries see her broken. Her final moments were a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. As the guillotine fell, it marked not just the death of a queen, but the death of a world that had once been defined by its lavish court and its whispered love affairs. The Queen's love life, once hidden in the shadows, had become a public spectacle, and it was that very spectacle that helped to seal her fate. Marie Antoinette's affair with Fersen, though tragic, was a reflection of the larger forces at work in France during the late 18th century. It was a time when personal desires collided with political necessity, when love was a commodity to be traded in the service of power. And in the case of Marie, her love affairs became just one of the many ways the monarchy was undermined from within. Her relationships, once seen as acts of rebellion and desire, were now symbols of a deeper problem, one that was too great to ignore. The political collapse of the monarchy was inevitable, and Marie Antoinette, despite her best efforts to maintain control over her personal life, had been caught in the tide of revolution that swept across France. The legacy of Marie Antoinette, particularly in relation to her love affairs, is one that has been debated and reimagined over the centuries. In the years following her death, the Queen's reputation underwent a transformation. From being viewed as the frivolous, out-of-touch queen who had caused the downfall of France, she began to be remembered as a tragic figure, a woman who had suffered at the hands of a revolution that sought to destroy everything she represented. Her love affair with Fersen, once the subject of scandal, became part of the narrative of her victimhood. She was no longer the symbol of excess. She became the symbol of sacrifice, a woman whose love had been silenced by the revolution. But while her death marked the end of her reign, It also marked the beginning of a new chapter in French history. The monarchy was gone, but the myths surrounding Marie Antoinette endured. Her forbidden love affairs, once hidden from the public eye, became part of the larger story of the monarchy's collapse. And though the revolutionaries sought to strip away her humanity, Marie's legacy, shaped by both her personal desires and her political failures, continued to resonate with the French people for generations. As time passed, Marie Antoinette's story became one of the most iconic in history. Her love affairs, particularly with Fersen, were remembered not just as scandals, but as part of a larger tragedy. The Queen, once a symbol of royal decadence, was now a martyr for the old order, a symbol of the personal and political cost of revolution. Her life and her death were a reflection of the times in which she lived, times marked by passion, politics, and power struggles that would forever shape the course of history. The aftermath of Marie Antoinette's execution saw her life transformed into myth, a tragic tale that would be retold for generations. The revolutionary forces that had once sought to bring down the monarchy now turned their attention to the task of reimagining France's future. But amid the fervor of change, there was a need to define what had come before: the monarchy, its lavish court, and the queen whose very life had embodied both the virtues and vices of the old regime. The myth of Marie Antoinette, particularly regarding her personal life and love affairs, began to take on new dimensions. For years, she had been vilified as the queen who had plunged France into financial ruin, a woman who, consumed by her desires and her relationships, had ignored the struggles of the people. But after her death, as the dust of revolution settled, a more sympathetic view of the queen began to emerge. The narrative that had once painted her as an emblem of royal excess now began to shift. No longer was she simply a figure of scandal. She became a martyr, a woman whose forbidden love affairs, though once used against her, now became part of a larger story of sacrifice. Marie's relationship with Count Axel von Fersen remained a key point of fascination. In the years following her death, historians and biographers sought to understand the true nature of their bond. Was it love in the truest sense? Or was it a product of the political chaos surrounding them? Did their relationship represent a fleeting moment of happiness for the queen? Or was it an escape from the suffocating world of Versailles, a world where duty and decorum often overpowered personal desires? The speculation about Fersen's role in Marie's life became even more pronounced as new information came to light. Letters between the two were unearthed, revealing a complex relationship filled with deep affection, longing, and frustration. These documents painted a picture of a queen caught between the demands of her royal duties and her longing for genuine human connection. The letters, though never fully candid in their descriptions, hinted at a love that was both forbidden and doomed. They depicted Fersen as a man who, despite his own political ambitions, truly cared for Marie, and Marie, in turn, appeared to see him as someone who could offer the emotional connection that she had never found in her marriage to Louis XVI. But the romantic narrative was not the only way Marie was remembered. Her legacy was shaped as much by the tragedy of her fate as by the forbidden love affairs that had so captivated the public during her reign. The Queen's execution had been one of the most traumatic moments in the history of the Revolution, and it had become a symbol of the monarchy's total collapse. Her death, at the hands of the revolutionaries, was seen by some as a necessary act of justice, while others viewed it as a tragic end to a life marked by duty, sacrifice, and lost opportunities for happiness. Her love life, now viewed through the lens of history, became emblematic of the tensions that defined the monarchy in its final days. It was a time when personal desires could no longer be separated from political realities, when the Queen's heartache and longing for affection became part of the larger political narrative that helped to topple the old order. In the eyes of the revolutionaries, Marie's relationships were not just personal failings. They were part of the greater moral corruption that had led to the downfall of the monarchy. Yet, as time passed, this narrative began to soften. The Queen's love affairs, once seen as proof of her irresponsibility, became part of the narrative of her tragic victimhood. Historians would continue to examine Marie's love life for years to come, trying to understand the depth of her relationships, particularly with Fersen. Were these affairs acts of rebellion against the constraints of her position, or were they simply the emotional cries of a woman who had been forced into a life of political duty and public scrutiny? The answers, of course, would never be fully known. What is certain, however, is that these relationships, particularly the one with Fersen, played a pivotal role in shaping the Queen's legacy. Marie's life and death continued to inspire writers, artists, and filmmakers, all of whom sought to portray the Queen in a light that had never before been seen. Her love life, the scandals, the whispers, and the romance, all of it became part of the mythology that surrounded her. As time passed, Marie Antoinette was no longer just the queen who had lived in excess. She was the woman who had been caught between duty and desire, the tragic figure who had paid the ultimate price for her personal longings. Her love affairs, once the cause of public outrage, became part of the tragic tapestry of her life, a life that, though marred by scandal, was ultimately one of deep emotional complexity. The French Revolution had changed the course of history, but the story of Marie Antoinette, the queen who had lived a life of forbidden love, would never be forgotten. Her legacy, shaped by both her political struggles and her personal passions, remained a part of the collective consciousness, reminding future generations of the complexity of human desires, the intersection of politics and love, and the price of living in a world where both were often at odds. The myth of Marie Antoinette would endure for centuries, evolving into a narrative that transcended her own life. By the time the 19th century rolled around, the Queen's story had become an allegory, a symbol not only of the downfall of the monarchy, but also of the contradictions within the French aristocracy. Her love affairs, once the subject of scandal and political attack, had been woven into the fabric of a tragic legend, painting her as a misunderstood and victimized queen. The story of Marie and her forbidden love became more than just the tale of one woman's romance. It was a reflection of the dangers of living in a world where personal desires were seen as threats to political power. After her death, the revolutionaries had hoped that Marie Antoinette's execution would signal the end of the monarchy's stranglehold on French society. But as the years passed, the monarchy's fall took on a tragic air, with the Queen's fate often symbolizing not just political defeat, but the personal cost of the revolution itself. The story of Marie's love life, particularly her relationship with Fersen, became a focal point for historians, artists, and writers alike, who sought to understand the complexity of a woman who had lived her life in the public eye, bound by the expectations of duty, love, and scandal. While the French Revolution had sought to strip away the pomp and power of the monarchy, the tale of Marie Antoinette revealed that the real power had always lay in the ability to influence hearts and minds. Even as the monarchy crumbled, the legend of the Queen's forbidden love endured, with her affairs casting a long shadow over the political landscape that followed. Marie's tragic end, her execution at the hands of the revolutionaries, became a moment of both personal and political reckoning, a reminder of the high cost of living in a world where loyalty and love had become casualties of political revolution. In the years following her death, many began to reconsider the Queen's life and legacy. Some saw her as a tragic figure who had been a pawn in the hands of powerful forces, caught between love and duty. Others viewed her as a symbol of the aristocracy's failure, to understand the pain of the common people. A queen whose personal indulgences had led to her downfall. Yet, even in the midst of the revolution's success, there remained a deep sense of loss for the world that had existed before it, an idealized image of Marie Antoinette as the Queen of Versailles, beautiful, untouchable, and tragically human. As the decades wore on, Marie Antoinette's life was retold again and again, each retelling adding new layers to her story. Writers, filmmakers, and artists shaped her image in ways that suited the political moods of their time. In the 19th century, she was often portrayed as a tragic martyr, a woman whose innocent desire for love had been punished by a cruel and unforgiving revolution. In the 20th century, however, her image would shift once more, with more emphasis placed on her role in the political drama of her time. For some, she was no longer just a tragic victim, but a symbol of the moral decay of the old regime, a woman who had failed to recognize the coming storm of revolution until it was too late. Yet beneath all the political analysis and artistic reinterpretation, the core of Marie Antoinette's story remained her love life, her forbidden relationships, her search for affection, and her emotional isolation in the face of the unrelenting pressures of royalty. Whether seen as a queen who succumbed to scandal, or as a woman who was simply trying to find love in a world that demanded so much of her, Marie's love affairs would continue to define her legacy for centuries to come. In the end, Marie Antoinette became a symbol of the dangers of unchecked power, the vulnerability of those who live in the public eye, and the complexities of the human heart. Her story, shaped by both her love life and her political struggles, would continue to be retold, inspiring new generations to reflect on the intersections of love, duty, and revolution. Her forbidden love, once scandalous, became a poignant reflection of the human condition, a reminder that even those who seem to have everything are often the most vulnerable to the forces of fate and history. Her love life, once the subject of endless gossip and speculation, would live on in the collective memory as a powerful symbol of the personal costs of revolution. A love that was both beautiful and tragic, a connection that transcended politics and power, and a reminder of the deep emotional desires that drive us all, no matter the era. As time marched on, the revolution that had toppled Marie Antoinette's reign gave way to a new chapter in France's history. But even in the wake of this monumental political shift, the figure of Marie Antoinette would continue to haunt the French consciousness, her image evolving from that of a scandalous queen to a complex symbol of tragedy, love, and power. Her forbidden love affairs, especially her relationship with Count Axel von Fersen, remained focal points of fascination, but they were no longer just scandalous whispers in the corridors of Versailles. They became integral to understanding her humanity and the larger forces at play during her time. Marie's personal desires and emotional struggles had been largely ignored during her life. As queen, she was expected to embody the values of monarchy, to project strength, dignity, and unwavering loyalty to her country. Yet behind that public image, she was a woman with emotional needs and desires, one whose search for affection and connection often placed her at odds with the very institution she represented. Her affair with Fersen, though never fully acknowledged, became emblematic of the Queen's emotional isolation. He was not just a lover, he was a confidant, a source of comfort in a world where the Queen had few true allies. The affair, however, was never fully realized. The political pressures of the time, combined with the Queen's position at court, made it impossible for their relationship to ever blossom into the love affair they may have both longed for. Fersen, though deeply affectionate towards Marie, was also a man of his time, a man who understood that his actions would have political consequences. And Marie, despite her deep affection for him, was not free to choose her own path. She was a queen, bound by duty and the expectations of her position, and her personal desires were often sacrificed for the sake of maintaining the appearance of royal stability. In the years following her death, the love story between Marie and Fersen would become one of the most enduring and poignant aspects of her legacy. Their relationship was reimagined as a tale of deep emotional connection, a tragic love that could not withstand the pressures of royalty and revolution. But what the historians and biographers could never fully capture was the essence of their relationship, the quiet moments they shared, the unspoken understanding between them, and the longing that remained unfulfilled. In this sense, the affair transcended mere political scandal. It became a symbol of the Queen's humanity, her vulnerability, and her deep, unspoken desire for a life outside the constraints of the throne. The Queen's emotional life, as it was revealed through her letters and the writings of those close to her, also offered a glimpse into the personal cost of the monarchy's power. Her love for Fersen and the pain of its unfulfilled nature mirrored the larger struggles of the French aristocracy. The monarchy had long been out of touch with the needs of the common people. But Marie Antoinette's personal struggles also highlighted the isolation of the royals from each other. Her husband, Louis XVI, though a well-meaning and kind man, was often distant, a figurehead who failed to emotionally connect with his queen. Their marriage, though solid in political terms, was not a source of emotional solace for Marie. Historians still debate whether Marie's emotional isolation played a role in the unraveling of the monarchy. Did her search for love and affection, her need for connection, distract her from the responsibilities of ruling a nation in crisis? Could she have been more attuned to the growing discontent among the people had she not been consumed by her own personal heartache? These questions remain unanswered, but they highlight the complexity of Marie Antoinette's position as a monarch. She was a woman who was both a queen and a person, someone who lived a life full of contradictions. As the decades passed, the memory of Marie Antoinette would continue to evolve. While the revolutionaries had seen her as a symbol of the monarchy's excesses, later generations began to view her as a tragic victim, caught in a system that demanded more of her than she could give. The affair with Fersen, once seen as a scandalous indulgence, became a poignant element of her story. It represented the personal cost of being a queen in a world that allowed little room for emotional fulfillment. The romanticized view of Marie's life was often at odds with the political reality of the time. The revolution had promised a new world, one where the old aristocracy was dismantled, but in doing so, it created a new form of inequality, one that was just as rigid and unforgiving as the old. The new republic, though free from the monarchy, was still bound by the same forces of power, politics, and personal desire that had plagued the monarchy. Marie Antoinette's legacy, shaped by her love life, her political struggles, and her tragic end, would continue to be debated for generations to come. Was she a tragic figure whose heart had been broken by the demands of duty? Or was she a symbol of the excesses that had led to the downfall of the monarchy? Whatever the answer, her story remains one of the most compelling in history. A tale of a woman who tried to find love and freedom in a world that would not let her. In the aftermath of the French Revolution, as the dust of societal upheaval began to settle, the tale of Marie Antoinette lived on, transformed into a symbol of both the monarchy's fall and the complexities of human emotion. In the years following her death, the contradictions in her life, her love affairs, her political struggles, and the immense pressure she faced as queen would continue to captivate the imaginations of both French citizens and the world at large. Her forbidden love with Count Axel von Fersen became a key focal point in the larger narrative of her life, turning from scandalous whispers into a poignant and tragic love story that echoed long after her execution. The image of Marie Antoinette, once marked by scandal, began to take on a more sympathetic tone. She was no longer solely the extravagant and out-of-touch queen who symbolized the excesses of the old regime. Instead, in the decades after her death, she became a martyr for a cause, the tragic, misunderstood monarch whose personal desires were caught in the web of political and social upheaval. Her love life, especially her relationship with Fersen, was viewed not just as a personal indulgence, but as a symbol of the Queen's humanity, her emotional isolation, and her struggle to find a balance between royal duty and personal happiness. Her affair with Fersen, though never publicly acknowledged, was romanticized in the years after her death, shifting from a private scandal to a symbol of unfulfilled love and personal sacrifice. Their relationship was often described in a more tragic light, two souls who were drawn together by genuine affection, but were unable to fulfill their love because of the demands of their roles in the world. In the eyes of many, Fersen became a figure who represented the idealized, romantic notion of love that transcended the political and personal constraints of the court. But while historians and artists alike would continue to examine their relationship, Marie's personal life was not the only aspect of her legacy that endured. Her political role as the Queen of France remained a crucial part of how she was remembered. While some saw her as a victim of circumstance, others continued to view her through the lens of her actions as a queen. Her extravagance, her apparent disinterest in the struggles of the French people, and her inability to understand the scope of the revolution had been some of the very reasons for the public's disdain. Yet, as the years passed, the people of France began to reflect on the revolution itself, what it had achieved and what it had destroyed. The ultimate collapse of the monarchy left a void that no amount of revolutionary zeal could fill. The vision of the future, although democratic and egalitarian in theory, often became as fractured as the monarchy it had replaced. And in that void, the memory of Marie Antoinette persisted as a reminder of what had been lost. In popular culture, the Queen's image would undergo several transformations, shifting from one of derision to one of tragic heroism. Films, books, and plays would depict her as a victim of circumstance, a queen trapped by the very institution she was meant to embody. Her love affairs, particularly her relationship with Fersen, were often portrayed as the defining features of her humanity. It was through these intimate moments, often dramatized for effect, that Marie's story continued to resonate with audiences. In each retelling, her search for love, for understanding, became a powerful metaphor for the universal human desire to find connection in a world of overwhelming responsibilities. Marie Antoinette's image as the victim of the revolution became ingrained in the cultural memory of France. She was not just a queen who had fallen from grace. She became an emblem of the price of power and the limitations of duty. The French Revolution, while undoubtedly a radical and transformative moment in history, had also been brutal. The execution of Marie Antoinette, a woman who had been both beloved and reviled, reminded people of the cost of revolution, a cost that was paid not just by the monarchs who lost their crowns, but by the ideals that led to their downfall. As time moved on, the Queen's love life, once seen as a scandal, began to be understood as something more complex, a reflection of the human condition itself. The love between Marie and Fersen, though never fully realized, was a story of yearning, desire, and missed opportunities. It became clear that her emotional struggles were not unlike those of many others, caught between the roles they were forced to play and the desires they longed to fulfill. It was this conflict that made her a timeless figure, her personal tragedies speaking to the collective human experience. In the end, Marie Antoinette's love life became not just the subject of historical inquiry, but a lasting symbol of the tension between personal desires and political realities. Her life was a series of complex contradictions between royal duty and personal passion, between the demands of the monarchy and the dreams of a woman who longed for freedom. Her legacy, shaped by these contradictions, would continue to be explored, reinterpreted, and celebrated as one of history's most enduring stories of love, loss, and political turmoil. As the centuries passed, the story of Marie Antoinette remained one of the most captivating and multifaceted in history. Her life, filled with lavish extravagance, personal heartbreak, and political upheaval, would continue to serve as a powerful reminder of the human capacity for both greatness and vulnerability. While the revolution had shattered the monarchy, the legacy of the Queen persisted, reshaped by those who told her story. The whispers of her forbidden love, particularly her unfulfilled relationship with Count Axel von Fersen, continued to reverberate across the ages, carrying with them a bittersweet poignancy that echoed through literature, art, and culture. In the 20th century, the Queen's image was re-examined with a new lens one that sought to uncover the complexities of her character and the intricacies of her relationships. The once vilified Queen began to be seen not just as a symbol of decadence, but as a woman caught in the webs of duty, love, and revolution. As social historians and biographers dove deeper into the nuances of Marie's life, her image transformed. From a frivolous queen who had led her country to ruin, she evolved into a figure whose private desires were linked to the broader story of the monarchy's inevitable collapse. Her relationship with Fersen, while always central to this new narrative, became more than just a scandal. It was recast as an expression of her deepest emotions, emotions that had long been suppressed by the rigid expectations of her royal role. In the eyes of many, Fersen was not simply another lover or a political pawn. He became a reflection of Marie's own sense of longing and yearning for something more than what she could find in her royal duties. The affair, whether real or imagined, was seen as an attempt to break free from the suffocating political world that had trapped her. But this re-evaluation of Marie's love life was not just an act of romanticizing the past. It was a recognition of the constraints that had been placed on her. Historians began to explore how Marie's desires were not merely personal indulgences, but reactions to the political and social system she was thrust into. Her love affair with Fersen and her other relationships became metaphors for the way individuals, especially women, navigated power dynamics in an era where their personal choices were subject to political consequences. Her emotional isolation was palpable. As the Queen of France, Marie was expected to embody the ideals of the monarchy's strength, dignity, and unwavering loyalty to her country. But beneath that facade, she was a woman who, like anyone, longed for connection, understanding, and affection. The emotional toll of being queen in an age where one's personal life was scrutinized and dissected for political gain took a significant toll on her mental and emotional well-being. And though her love life was often viewed through the lens of scandal, it was ultimately a reflection of the struggles she faced as a woman who had to balance her personal desires with the demands of her station. But for all the attention given to her love affairs, it was Marie's ultimate fate that would define her legacy. The Queen's final moments, her trial, her execution, were not just the end of a reign, but the end of a way of life. The monarchy that had ruled France for centuries was gone, and in its place was a new revolutionary era. Yet even as she died, Marie's legacy remained, particularly in how her story intersected with the larger forces of history forces that demanded personal sacrifice, moral judgment, and public scrutiny. Marie Antoinette's death was a moment of both finality and transition. The world she had known, where the personal and the political were often inseparable, was forever gone. In her death, she became a symbol not only of the monarchy's collapse, but of the human costs of revolution. The people who had once hailed her as their queen were now those who called for her execution. But in that final act, Marie's image began to shift once more. The queen who had been vilified in life as a symbol of royal excess became, in death, a figure of sympathy and tragedy. The revolution had consumed her, yet it had not extinguished the myth of Marie Antoinette, her love, her loss, her humanity. As the centuries rolled on, her image would be redefined again and again, depending on the lens through which it was viewed. In the modern era, Marie Antoinette's image became synonymous with both grandeur and tragedy, a figure whose life seemed to embody the contradictions of the old regime. Her love affairs, particularly with Fersen, were no longer simply viewed as political missteps or personal indulgences. They were seen as expressions of a woman's yearning for more than the life that had been mapped out for her by history and duty. Her affair with Fersen, despite its secrecy and its tragic end, came to symbolize the desire for love and connection in a world where such desires were often forbidden. Marie's legacy, shaped by both her political struggles and her personal life, transcended the boundaries of her time. Her story would continue to serve as a reminder of the complexities of power, love, and duty, a tale that would be retold in endless ways, always evoking new layers of meaning. The whispers of her forbidden love, once a scandal in the halls of Versailles, would continue to reverberate, turning her story into one of the most enduring and tragic in history. As the centuries continued to pass, Marie Antoinette's story began to be woven into the fabric of popular culture in new and often unexpected ways. Her image, once a symbol of everything wrong with the monarchy, transformed into a complex character that mirrored the changing values and perceptions of successive generations. The Queen's forbidden love affairs, particularly her relationship with Count Axel von Fersen, were no longer seen as mere scandals. Instead, they became integral parts of the narrative surrounding her tragic downfall, representing the deep emotional struggles of a woman caught between duty, love, and the unrelenting political forces of her time. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, as the world continued to grapple with the consequences of revolution, war, and political upheaval, historians and artists revisited Marie's life and legacy. The queen, who had once been portrayed as out of touch and self-indulgent, was now viewed as a more sympathetic figure. Her love life, particularly her emotional bond with Fersen, became a symbol of the human cost of political power. The relationship between Marie and Fersen, filled with longing, frustration, and unfulfilled passion, resonated with audiences in a way that had not been seen before. It was a love story overshadowed by history, but still one of the most poignant and tragic of its time. In the cultural imagination, Marie Antoinette became both a symbol of royal excess and a symbol of the cost of power. Her love life was no longer just the subject of gossip or scandal. It was part of the larger conversation about the personal sacrifices that those in power often made in the name of duty. Historians began to explore her story through the lens of feminist theory, viewing Marie as a woman who was not only a victim of her circumstances, but also a person whose personal desires were tragically overshadowed by the rigid structures of the monarchy. This reevaluation of Marie Antoinette's character was further solidified by the 20th century fascination with royalty and revolution. The Queen's image was romanticized in film, literature, and art, where she was often portrayed as a tragic heroine. The Queen's love affair with Fersen, in particular, became a key element in these depictions. It was not simply a story of scandal and political intrigue, it was a story of lost love, of a woman who, despite her position, was just as vulnerable to the winds of fate as anyone else. Fersen, too, was portrayed as the idealized lover, the man who understood the Queen's inner turmoil and provided the emotional connection she so desperately sought, even though their relationship could never fully materialize. In these retellings, the Queen's love life became a metaphor for the larger conflicts that defined her reign. Her affair with Fersen symbolized the tension between personal freedom and public duty, a tension that many viewers, both in the 18th century and in later generations, could relate to. The royal court of Versailles, with its rigid hierarchies and expectations, became a stage for Marie's inner conflict. Her personal desires were constantly at odds with her role as queen. Her love affair with Fersen was not just an emotional escape. It was also a rebellion against the limitations of her station. It was a way for Marie to feel like a woman, not just a queen, a person with desires, hopes, and dreams, not just a symbol of royal power. However, even as her love life was romanticized, it remained tied to the larger story of the monarchy's fall. The French Revolution had irreparably altered the course of history, and while the monarchy was destroyed, the Queen's personal struggles lived on in the collective memory of the people. In the years following the Revolution, the tale of Marie Antoinette became a part of the national psyche, a story of a woman who had suffered for the sins of her family and her country. She was no longer just a symbol of royal excess. She was also a symbol of the tragic consequences of a system that had outlived its usefulness. Marie Antoinette's love affairs, once seen as acts of political indulgence, became emblematic of the personal costs of living in a world where every action, every desire, was scrutinized and politicized. In this new era, her story was one of both personal vulnerability and political collapse. Her love for Fersen, though never fully realized, remained a symbol of unfulfilled longing, a reflection of the emotional isolation that comes with the demands of power and duty. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, Marie Antoinette's legacy continued to evolve. She became the subject of modern films, books, and scholarly works that sought to delve deeper into her character, her struggles, and her relationships. New perspectives on her life emerged, influenced by the changing social and political climates of the modern world. The Queen was no longer just a figure of scandal or tragedy. She became a symbol of the complexities of power, the difficulties of personal fulfillment, and the universal human desire for love and connection. Her love life, particularly with Fersen, remained central to these new interpretations. It was not merely the affair of a frivolous queen. It was the story of a woman caught in a world of political intrigue, personal sacrifice, and emotional longing. In the end, Marie Antoinette's love for Fersen, though unfulfilled and tragically interrupted by history, became one of the most enduring symbols of her life. It was a love that transcended political barriers, a love that was both a refuge and a source of heartbreak, a love that would continue to be remembered long after her death, as a testament to the enduring complexity of human emotion and the personal costs of living in a world of power and politics. Marie Antoinette's story would continue to evolve as the centuries passed, shifting between myth and history. Though the Revolution had torn apart the French monarchy, it also paved the way for the cultural reinvention of its figures. Marie Antoinette, more than any other royal figure, became emblematic of both the lavish excesses and the human vulnerabilities of her time. While she was once vilified for her apparent disregard for the struggles of the common people, the passing decades have allowed her to be seen through a more sympathetic lens, especially in relation to her forbidden love affairs. Her relationship with Count Axel von Fersen, once a scandalous subject of royal gossip, became one of the most discussed and romanticized aspects of her life. The affair between the Queen and the Swedish nobleman, which had been carefully hidden from the public eye, began to take on new significance in the modern retellings of Marie's story. What had once been an act of rebellion against the stifling protocols of the French court transformed into a poignant love story. Fersen's love for Marie was no longer just a brief affair or a political maneuver. It became the symbol of her deep emotional longing, her isolation, and her longing for affection in a world that demanded so much from her. For many, Fersen came to represent more than just a lover. He was a figure who provided Marie with the emotional support that her husband, King Louis XVI, could not. Louis, though a kind and well-intentioned man, was emotionally distant and often unable to connect with his queen. This left Marie to seek companionship and comfort elsewhere, and in Fersen she found a connection that was both sincere and full of deep emotion. Though their love was never fully realized in the way they may have wished, it was a bond that transcended the confines of royal duty and political necessity. But in the grand scheme of history, the Queen's love life was never just a matter of personal desire. It was deeply entangled in the political turmoil of the time. Marie's affections, particularly her bond with Fersen, were scrutinized through the lens of revolution and rebellion. To the revolutionaries, Marie's private life, which had been filled with intrigue, passion, and political maneuvering, was a symbol of the monarchy's failings. The Queen, whose role was supposed to be that of a steadfast protector of France, had been seen by many as indulgent and disconnected from the everyday suffering of her people. Her romantic entanglements were viewed by some as further evidence of her inability to understand the seriousness of the political landscape in which she lived. The changing perspective on Marie Antoinette's love life also reflects broader changes in society's understanding of royal power and personal freedom. In the modern world, we can see Marie as both a product of her time and a woman who was caught in the crossfire of political and social upheaval. Her story, now recast as one of personal tragedy, highlights the emotional toll of living in an environment where public duty and private desire were constantly at odds. Her quest for affection and emotional connection, particularly through her bond with Fersen, symbolizes the very human need for intimacy and companionship, even for those who appear to have everything at their disposal. Her love life, as it was depicted in literature, film, and historical analysis, became symbolic of the tension between personal freedom and the public roles that individuals are expected to play. The relationship with Fersen was more than just a royal scandal. It was a reminder of the immense emotional pressure placed on Marie as a queen, a woman whose every desire and action was politicized and subjected to the judgment of history. It was a story of love that could never be fully realized, a tale of longing and heartbreak that transcended political alliances and royal duty. Marie's forbidden love affair, far from being a mere moment of indulgence, became an allegory for the human condition, highlighting the universal experience of longing for connection, affection, and love in a world that often demands sacrifice and duty above all else. Through Fersen, Marie was able to experience what many in her position could never: genuine emotional intimacy. Yet that very love, once so personal and private, became part of the public story of her downfall, woven into the political narrative that led to her tragic fate. Her legacy was further shaped by the reinterpretation of her final days. After her execution, Marie Antoinette was transformed from a symbol of aristocratic excess to a martyr for the monarchy, and later to a tragic hero whose personal story resonated with generations of people who could relate to the conflict between love and duty. The affair with Fersen, once the center of scandal, was now viewed through a lens of sympathy, as the tragic romance of a woman who had been denied true love due to the demands of power. It became part of the larger historical narrative of royal life, love, and lost, lessons that continue to resonate in modern discussions about the nature of monarchy, power, and the human heart. In the 21st century, the continued fascination with Marie's love affairs speaks to the enduring appeal of her story. While she may never have fully escaped the shadow of her role in history, her personal life continues to captivate those who seek to understand the woman behind the crown. Marie Antoinette's love for Fersen, though tragic and unfulfilled, became a testament to the enduring human need for connection, affection, and the search for love in a world that often demands so much from its rulers. The story of Marie Antoinette, particularly the tale of her forbidden love, became a cornerstone of French cultural memory, deeply embedded in the collective consciousness of the nation. Even as the monarchy had crumbled, the myth of Marie endured, a symbol of both the downfall of a regime and the personal tragedies that arose from the collision of royal duty and personal desire. The Queen's forbidden affair with Count Axel von Fersen, once hidden behind the opulent walls of Versailles, became a narrative of deep emotional significance, reflecting the universal struggle between love and obligation. In modern times, as historical scholarship has expanded, there has been a renewed focus on Marie Antoinette's complex character. Scholars and biographers began to view her not just as a passive victim of circumstance, but as a woman with agency, one who was acutely aware of the political environment around her, yet also deeply human in her desires and actions. Her relationship with Fersen became a focal point in this re-evaluation, representing the deep emotional isolation that defined much of her reign. Fersen's love, though never fully realized, became an enduring symbol of the Queen's struggle to find solace and companionship in a world where she was constantly scrutinized and judged. While the affair was marked by secrecy, its significance was not lost on those who lived through the aftermath of her execution. For many revolutionaries, the scandal of Marie's relationships served as a tool to delegitimize the monarchy. Her emotional attachments to foreign courtiers, such as Fersen, were seen as evidence of her disloyalty to France, a reflection of the moral decay within the royal family. However, as the years passed and the fervor of the revolution subsided, public perception began to soften. Marie Antoinette was no longer simply a symbol of aristocratic excess. She became a tragic figure whose love life, marked by passion and heartache, humanized her in the eyes of a more sympathetic public. Her relationship with Fersen, particularly after her death, became more than just a royal scandal. It evolved into a symbol of lost opportunities. For many, it represented the deep sorrow of a woman who had been denied the chance to live a life of her own choosing. The political demands of her position, her marriage to a king who was emotionally distant, and the overwhelming pressures of the court all weighed heavily on her. Fersen, with his affection and understanding, represented the possibility of love in its purest form, a love that was tragically unfulfilled due to the constraints of royal life. The narrative of Marie Antoinette and Fersen became intertwined with the broader historical context of the monarchy's fall, an example of how personal desires were often sacrificed for the sake of duty. The love affair between Marie and Fersen, though never publicly confirmed in its entirety, was given new life through the discovery of letters and memoirs that revealed the depth of their connection. These documents, which surfaced in the years after Marie's death, painted a more intimate portrait of their relationship, one that showed Fersen not as a mere courtier, but as a man deeply moved by Marie's plight. Their correspondence, while carefully worded and often veiled in political language, revealed a profound emotional bond that transcended the courtly formalities of the time. These letters, though discreet, hinted at the deep affection they shared, despite the overwhelming forces that kept them apart. As historians delve deeper into the Queen's life, the personal nature of her relationship with Fersen became a focal point for those seeking to understand the emotional and political pressures she faced. The Queen, who had long been viewed as a symbol of excess and indulgence, was now seen as a tragic figure, a woman caught between the ideals of her role as queen and the real emotions of a woman longing for love. Fersen, though distant from the court, remained an essential part of her emotional world. His presence in her letters, as well as the palpable longing in their exchanges, told a story of a relationship that had to remain in the shadows, even as it was a central part of Marie's personal life. The story of Marie's love for Fersen also became intertwined with the larger narrative of the monarchy's downfall. The revolution, which had sought to dismantle the aristocracy, used her emotional entanglements as one of the many justifications for her execution. Her personal relationships were politicized, seen as evidence of her disloyalty to the revolutionary ideals that had overtaken France. The Queen's love life, once a private affair, became an open book for the revolutionaries to exploit, and it was used to further denounce her as an emblem of the decadent monarchy. But as the years wore on, the story of Marie Antoinette's love for Fersen began to be reframed. In the light of new historical analysis, Marie was no longer seen as the sole perpetrator of a royal system that had failed. Her love life, far from being a mere scandal, became a reflection of her struggle to find emotional peace in a world that demanded everything from her. It became clear that her love for Fersen was more than just a passing fancy. It was a deep connection, a rare moment of genuine affection in the otherwise cold world of Versailles. Today, as Marie's story is revisited in the public imagination, her relationship with Fersen stands as one of the most poignant elements of her legacy. It is not merely a footnote in the annals of history, but a symbol of the human need for love and connection, even in the face of duty, politics, and revolution. The tragedy of their relationship, unfulfilled and ultimately lost to history, mirrors the larger tragedy of Marie's own life, a life marked by sacrifice, longing, and the ultimate loss of everything she had once known. In the end, Marie Antoinette's legacy became something far beyond what anyone could have anticipated when she first ascended the throne as the Queen of France. Her name, once synonymous with excess and frivolity, was transformed into a symbol of tragedy, human frailty, and the inescapable weight of royal duty. Her forbidden love affairs, particularly with Count Axel von Fersen, were no longer seen as just royal scandals. They were symbolic of a deeper, more universal conflict between personal desires and the rigid expectations of society. In the public imagination, Marie's emotional struggles became intertwined with the narrative of revolution, monarchy, and political change. What had once been private became part of the larger fabric of a nation's history. After her death, the myth of Marie Antoinette would continue to be told and retold, each generation reshaping her image to reflect the values of its time. The initial backlash against her, as the queen who let them eat cake, eventually gave way to a more nuanced and empathetic view. The woman who had been vilified as out of touch with the suffering of the people was gradually transformed into a tragic martyr, a queen who had been both a victim of her circumstances and a woman caught in a web of political turmoil. Her forbidden love affair with Fersen became a central part of this new narrative, a poignant illustration of her deep emotional longing and the isolation she felt within the monarchy. Her relationship with Fersen was one of the few parts of her personal life that remained somewhat private, even as the rest of her world was exposed to public scrutiny. It was a love that could never fully come to fruition, constrained by political realities, royal obligations, and the overwhelming tide of revolution. In the years following her death, Fersen's role in her life would be scrutinized, and his letters to Marie would be revisited as evidence of a love that was both sincere and tragic. Historians would continue to debate whether their relationship was truly one of romantic love or simply the product of two people, seeking solace in a time of immense personal and political stress. But regardless of how their relationship was classified, it remained a symbol of Marie's humanity, a testament to her need for connection in a world that offered her little room for emotional freedom. In popular culture, the story of Marie Antoinette's love life would continue to captivate audiences for centuries. Films, books, and plays would depict her as both a tragic figure and a symbol of the excesses of monarchy. Yet in each retelling, her emotional journey, particularly her connection with Fersen, remained central to her legacy. Her love for Fersen became emblematic of her struggle to reconcile the personal with the political, the duty of her crown with the desires of her heart. The Queen's enduring emotional isolation, even as she sought comfort in the arms of a lover, became a powerful reminder of the toll that public life can take on an individual's sense of self. Even in the 21st century, the fascination with Marie Antoinette's life continues. The Queen, once reviled for her lavish lifestyle, is now often viewed through the lens of her personal tragedy. Her story has been retold in various forms, from academic studies to cinematic portrayals, each version adding layers to her character and legacy. The love story between Marie and Fersen, though never fully realized, has remained one of the most compelling aspects of her life, a reminder of the fragility of love and the ways in which political and social forces can shape the course of individual lives. The Queen's fate, her execution by guillotine, also cast a long shadow over her legacy. In death, she became a martyr for the monarchy and an enduring symbol of the cost of revolution. Her final moments facing the executioner with dignity, despite the tumultuous life she had led, served as a powerful contrast to the excesses of her earlier reign. Her love life, once a source of scandal, was now part of the larger narrative of a woman who had been sacrificed on the altar of history, caught between the demands of her royal station and her desire for emotional fulfillment. But Marie Antoinette's legacy is not just about tragedy, it is also about survival. Despite the scandals, the political upheaval, and her eventual downfall, she managed to carve out a place in history as more than just a queen. Her personal struggles, particularly her affair with Fersen, became symbols of the complexities of being human. Her love for him, though never fully realized, continued to inspire future generations to reflect on the deeper emotional currents that run through all of us, the longing for connection, the desire for love, and the inevitable sacrifices we make in pursuit of these ideals. The story of Marie Antoinette, now a rich tapestry of politics, love, and revolution, remains a powerful narrative of how personal desires and public duty can collide in dramatic and often tragic ways. It is a story that continues to resonate today, not just as a historical account of a queen's rise and fall, but as a reflection of the universal human experience. A woman who was both a queen and a person caught between two worlds, each demanding more of her than she could give. And in the end, it was that very tension, that tragic conflict between love and duty, that ensured her story would be remembered for generations to come. And so, as the final whispers of history fade into the quiet of the night, we leave Marie Antoinette's story behind, gently closing the chapter on a queen whose life was filled with both grandeur and heartache. Her love for Fersen, a tale of unspoken longing and tenderness, reminds us that even in the grandest palaces, where duty rules and royal responsibilities weigh heavy, the heart still seeks connection, affection, and peace. As we drift from the echoes of the French Revolution, we can carry with us the reminder that love, in its many forms, is often a quiet force, never truly bound by time or circumstance. Marie Antoinette, a woman of such complex beauty, both in her flaws and her grace, leaves us with this thought that even amid the most tumultuous of lives, There is always room for a simple, quiet yearning for love. Now, as you rest your mind and let the weight of the day slip away, I wish you a peaceful sleep. May your dreams be as gentle and kind as the love stories we've shared tonight. Sweet dreams and good night.